Go ahead, man. We're recording.
Sweet. So I got up pretty early this morning and just kind of so we hang all of our meat kind of that first night, and so I hung my meat last night and I left the hocks on the quarters. So this morning I got up, cut the hocks off, and then put it in on ice. So now it's just I'm actually going to take it to our Hunters for the Hungry program because our freezers are all full and we're waiting on a back ordered freezer to get in. So we've kind of got a meat surplus.
That's a good problem to have. I'm
Yeah.
working through my first two deer pretty quick. I'm gonna have to rely on some fish here for a little bit, which is nice. I got a good amount of halibut and some salmon, so that's nice. So it's great time of year to be eating. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you end up giving away much of your deer meat and stuff like that?
No, no,
No.
not. I got a buddy who cooks backstrap, and he made a fly tying table for
Uh-huh.
Abby. So
Uh-huh.
I gave him some backstrap. But for the most part, man, I keep it because then you like who do you give it to, who do you not, and then if they can get it themselves, and they're not huge deer, so
Yeah.
it's,
How much meat do you normally get off those bucks?
you can get between 40 and 50 pounds.
Okay.
You know,
That's about the exact same size as an antelope buck, I think.
yeah, yeah. When I was looking at and comparing, obviously they vary. You can get a
Yeah.
real big buck, um, but yeah, there's not a ton, but solid for sure. And
Huh.
if I go hunting with someone and they help me pack it out, I'll give them half. Um, so
That seems pretty customary.
yeah, yeah. And then when I went hunting with my buddy Dave, and he got a nice 4x3. He hadn't shot an alpine buck in a couple of years, and so I helped him pack it out and just gave it to him though, because he doesn't. He gets maybe one per year. Doesn't get too angry at it, so I just let him have the whole thing. I'm like, I don't need to be taking half your deer if I already have two. So
There you go.
yeah.
Well, you've had an epic start to the season, really.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to complain about, but there's always that other thing that you're like, nothing ever goes perfectly for longer than, two or three trips in a row. So there's been
Ah,
some,
or one in my case.
yeah, yeah. So I think it's epic in that that's, we've talked a lot about redefining your goals and your views of things, and I think that has something to do with it. So when those little things happen, you can still kind of smile and say, hey, man, I'm still getting out there. So compared to the alternative, this is still really, really good, but not perfect. So I have been up that mountain that I really wanted to go up twice, and I haven't seen any goats. But there has to be goats there. It's one of those peaks that I've seen the one side. I've just seen that bowl side, and I haven't seen that opposite ridge. I haven't seen up over the top on the northwest side. I haven't seen that opposite ridge. I haven't seen the ridge that goes away from the peak. So there's 4 different sides that I have not seen, and there has to be goats there. So that's still in the back of my head is, gosh, you've been up there twice and you haven't seen that one. And then the other spot where my buddy Dave got that really nice buck, we only saw maybe a fifth of that mountain, and that one could have goats. So I was hoping this year would be the year of the mountain goat, and I've been on some great hunts. Haven't seen one, but they've got to be there. So
Yeah, man, I hear you there though. Like it's like you set this goal in your mind and you're like, we can do this. And then, like with you, you found some awesome bucks right away. And then, I just punched my third antelope tag last night. So I was like, ear of the deer or the antelope, I guess that
yeah.
works.
I think you have to have goals, but then also be open and receptive to how things actually turn out. Because your antelope one didn't even start off very good because you had that you went to the wrong ridge, or the wrong what'd you do when you were running around the last time we were talking? You ran around to the wrong thing there and jacked that up.
Oh, well, archery hunting, yeah, antelope archery hunting, I think is just so dang hard. Like we had spotted these antelope, and like the thing that you're looking for when you're archery antelope hunting is just a good stock. Like you just need a good antelope need to be in a place where you can sneak up and be within bow range without them seeing you, which is dang near impossible. Except for this one time we drove by this cliff and there was a bunch of antelope beneath the cliff. And sure enough, I hop out and got so excited that they were under a cliff that I just like walked out onto the wrong ridge. I just didn't even walk on the right ridge of the cliff. So
Awesome.
it's not good. So, but we've got a term for that now, and that's called crash Jaden. When I just get too excited and I just like everything goes to shit.
Yeah,
And it's all predicated on just being like so excited and anxious and ready to like shoot the thing or whatever, like that I just don't think things through. And I actually did it again last night on my doe, and I feel
Perfect.
like really terrible about it.
Perfect lead.
Yeah.
So go ahead, tell the story.
Okay, so I think it's worth it to say opening morning of rifle season. So I had that one major crash. Because archery takes so much more of my focus, takes so much more like, like time and energy, and like the margin for error is less. I tend not to make too many crash decisions when I'm archery hunting, comparatively. And then like I was explaining this, like, and I hope listeners or you, Jeff, who've been hunting a decent, like made really good in the past or whatever, like then you get this overconfidence, right? Like, and this is kind of the crash, the overconfidence. When they're like, chip shot, piece of cake, and then you just rush in and then everything falls apart. So on the opening day of rifle antelope season here in Wyoming, we were out there at first light, like waiting for it to get light, and there was a buck and a group of does that were just right next to the truck, 200 yards from the truck. And I was like, let's see, I don't know if it's a big enough buck. And by the time the light got good enough to tell, they're walking away because they could see our truck. And I was like, shoot, I should definitely shoot that buck. So I got out, I laid down on my pack, trying to get a shot, like waiting for a shot. And that buck was just walking away. And he basically walked away from 250 yards out to 400 yards. And then, we tried to get around and chased him for basically a mile, they're just right on the edge of my comfortable shooting range, right? And we did that for a mile, and then we go, okay, this is stupid. We need to stop, like, whatever silliness we're doing. Go back to the truck. We're trying too hard. So we get back in the truck, and I'm like, okay, I know there's these goats that hang out, speed goats, for those who don't know, not mountain goats.
Yeah.
There's some goats that hang out around this alfalfa field. It's a private alfalfa field, but above there are these hills of BLM, Bureau of Land Management ground, and I know they've been in there. I actually got really close to a good buck in there with my bow, so I was like, let's just drive out in there. On my way to driving to that spot, there's a buck that crosses the little ridge line in front of us, and I look at it and I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good buck. And then he turned sideways and he's really goofy, and I was like, oh, I like that. And so I basically, like, after having, because we chased those antelope for a mile and then you had to walk a mile back to the truck. After doing a 2-mile like sprint the first part of the morning, this buck is right next to the road. And so I get out, and I thought it was 30 yards from the road that you needed to be. So I like got 30 yards from the road, sat down on my pack, and at 275 yards sitting, I shot this buck, and 10 ring. He bullseye. He runs a little bit and tips over right in sight, and I'm like, sweet. We go up there and clean him up and do the whole thing, and gosh, I'm just super stoked about that. Like that's how you want it to go, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I don't know what Jeff, what's like your comfortable shooting range normally?
It really
Curious.
depends.
Yeah.
Like having a good rest, I've shot out to 220, 230. But yeah, I don't really have. I would say I would cap at like a 250 or 300. I wouldn't even really approach much more. But I always really like getting closer, and I haven't really had to. I think I shot that one buck at 220. Other than that, everything else has been 100 to 150, if not
Okay.
closer. So
Well, and
that's your alpine deer. There's a lot of texture, so a lot of times you can get pretty close, and then in the woods you're going to be pretty close. So
man,
the
I,
shots across longer ridges, or out in the open there, like in the plains, like we don't have a whole lot of long shots.
but I love hearing that because it just like it confirms kind of like what I'm going to do moving forward. So okay, so this whole buck scenario, it works out great. Like this thing tips over, we got him cleaned up. We drove the truck like 350. I remember I ranged it from the carcass, 351 yards from the buck to the nearest road that we got to, like where he tipped over. And I'm like, awesome. So, um, this is all good. It works out great. And I have 2 doe tags to fill. And it's 9:30 in the morning and I'm done with my buck, right? Like but now it's on to the next. And so we go up to this new spot and there's some does and I'm like, sweet, like this is piece of cake. And it's a little bit breezy. And I go, oh, I think it's probably about 20-mile-an-hour wind. So if I'm at 250 yards, it's like only a 6-inch drift, yada yada. I do the whole calculation. I actually have this app on my phone called iStreetLock, and it's super sweet to help you like identify where you're gonna hit on something.
Oh,
And
nice.
so I was like, okay, 225 yards, 250 yards, whatever I don't remember the exact range from these antelope does. And I'm like, I just made a 275-yard shot. I made a 323-yard shot on a bear last spring. I was like, this should be just a chip shot. And sure enough, I sit down on my pack just like I did and squeeze off a shot and airball. I'm like, what the heck? So I was like, I think that was me. I just should have laid down on my pack or got a better shot, got a better rest. So we go up and around and lay down again or get up on these antelope again. And again, I just like, they were 180 yards and I sat down on my pack and shot and missed. And I'm like, what in the heck is going on, Jaden? So I go, we like, okay, it's too windy. My confidence is shook. We went to town to get some lunch. And as we're driving to town, we passed this sign that says on the highway, it says, caution, wind 60-mile-an-hour gusts. And I'm like, oh God, no. so So definitely that was some poor decision making on my part. I probably shouldn't have even been trying to make any shots if it was over like 125 yards, 100 yards. But I was out there trying to fling lead at 200 plus yards, in 60 plus mile an hour gusts, right? Like there's probably a 20 to 30 mile an hour steady wind. That was just stupid, right? And that was just classic crash Jaden. So that evening, the wind calms down. There's a big storm that rolls through, and then it's about 5 p.m. We go out, we find a doe, and Jess is like, hey, that one that's walking is 275 yards or 280, whatever it was. And then she's like, the one behind it is 320. And so I shoot, and I shoot a gun with a break, so I didn't like tell her that I was not going to shoot the closer one. So the closer goat started walking away from me. So instead of taking that shot, I took a shot on the one that was. It actually ended up being bedded, and I just kind of crashed Jaden to this one. And I was like, oh, I'll just shoot the bedded one. And when I did that, Jess was looking at the wrong one and thought that I had just totally airballed and hit something different. And it was just like, it's really like, it was just, again, just like not great communication. And good news is I made a pretty good shot, and that was like at 320 yards on that doe. Weirdly enough, we think it was shot before, and his whole back end was kind of destroyed, which was not great. Because basically what I did is I shot it, and it was like, center punched, lungs, and then walked up there and was like, oh, wait, this whole back end is destroyed. And it was not great. But, the doe ended up dying pretty quick. And we have a bunch of meat in the freezer from that doe. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
So we all tracking here. I had a great start, and then we had Crash Jaden on Saturday. Does that all make sense?
Yeah. You know what? People who don't have those sort of stories, you kind of wonder.
Yeah.
You can't do anything perfect. It's just trying to prevent things that might be a little bit, outlandish. And sometimes you get that confidence that you feel the wind. It doesn't feel that bad. And then you don't calculate exactly, oh, wait, this is actually pretty stout. Like I need to calculate. I need to do a little bit of math here and whether or not it's right. But,
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I looked at like the weather app, and said like, yo, it looks like it's 20-mile-an-hour wind right now. Like it should be fine. And it was one of those things where I just let my ego and confidence like get ahead of making good decisions. And so I hope folks don't do that. And I'm gonna keep reiterating this because I freaking did it again last night. So last night we only had a little bit of time after work, and we didn't want to go. We, as in Jess Johnson, my girlfriend, and I, and we were basically like, well, what should we do? Go hunting this evening, but like not have to drive to the Elkwood. So I was like, well, I got my doe tag, and we have 2 of our friends who are actually another coworker staying at the house. Just got into the truck, and they all had shotguns to shoot sage grouse. And I had my rifle just in case we saw a doe. And we went out back to this area. It's actually called the Domuta Triangle because every time I was hunting with my bow, I'd try to get on a doe back there or a buck. It doesn't matter. And all I could see was like them on one side of the ridge, and then I'd drop down and drop out of sight, and I'd pop up on the other side, and they'd be gone. Like they disappeared. So it's the Domuta Triangle. Anyway, and it's shaped like a triangle. It's great. So we drop into the Domuta Triangle, and Jess had seen sage grouse when she went back to get the packs when I went to work up the doe the other day. And I'm like, sweet, they should be right in here somewhere. And we walk up and over the ridge and are like, oh, there's some does 700 yards out. So we're like, let's go try to make a play on those. And we had an agreement with with all 3 of them. If there's a sage grouse nearby, shoot it. Like, I think there are plenty of opportunities, and I have a long season for my doe. So it was just kind of like, we're kind of just doing an opportunity hunt. And we get down there and drop into this little draw, and all of a sudden there's goats like 350 yards away, real close and relatively. And so we all sit down, and Jess is like, hey, that one is 300 yards away. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to see if I can get a good rest and make sure everything's all right, and then we'll see if I'll make a shot, going through my whole deal. And then a doe and a buck walk up over the ridge like 230 yards away. And I was like, oh, well, that's easy. So I'm looking at this doe, and let me just like clarify. I sight my rifle in for 0 to at 200 yards. Right. I'm looking at this doe, and all 3 of my compadres have their ears plugged because I shoot that gun with a break, and everyone's gonna have their eardrums blown out if they don't. So I don't have anybody spotting me, and I'm like, okay, great. This is a chip shot, And so that doe is walking towards me, or stopped staring at us, looking towards us. And I'm like, man, I'm dead on. I'm just going to shoot a frontal shot. And I do that, and we see blood come out the back end, and we're like, awesome. Like, it went through the front and then out the back. It's going to tip over anytime now, And we kind of walk down there, and she gets up again and starts running, and I start crash Jaden, and I start taking shots, and I missed twice.
Nice.
And as she's like wobbling away, and that's when your heart just drops to the pit of your stomach, and you're just like, oh no, what have I done? Like, this thing is really not in good shape. You got to keep your crap together so that you can do right by the animal, and like just like kind of finish it off. But this whole thing happens, and then it goes around the corner, and the doe goes around the corner, and we lose sight of her, and we're like, okay, well, there's a pile of blood that it can't make it very far, even if I miss, like I got femoral or something. And so sure enough, like, she's laying down in a ditch, and I finish her off a little while later. But anyway, the whole moral of the story is, I got down there and just was super confident in this shot. And every time that I've been overly confident in my shots is when everything goes south. Like, it's when I just lose my crap and don't think about my shot sequence, don't think about getting a good rest, don't think about the critter turning perfectly broadside and standing, all that stuff. And it was super humbling, man. It's like one of those things where today I feel like I'm picking myself up off the floor, because, like, not because we didn't retrieve her or anything like that. It just, like, when you make a decision that was not a good decision, there's no one else to blame. There's no wind to blame. Like, you can't, pick out other factors. You have to look at yourself and say, I pulled the trigger. Like, that was my fault. And that's kind of where I'm at today, is just being like, super humbled by that experience, and feeling like I really got to reset here, and make some good shots, especially going deer hunting and elk hunting that I have still coming up. It's just and it was a humbling experience.
All right. So next time you've got a nice opportunity out there, would you rather be feeling overly confident or being worried and not secure in yourself because of what happened last time?
Man, that's a good question. And I think each person, because like my remedy, I think, is to be really not unconfident, but just like really critical, and like really kind of concerned that I'm going to make the best shot, possible. Because, like, when I get overconfident, it's just like been the track record is that when I get too confident is when I take stupid shots, right? It's like, oh, I can do that. So for me, it's like I need to be a little worried and be sure that I can make the shot. And, and Jess talked about last night, she's like, well, you should probably consider taking some shorter shots. And which is like, I think she's right. And it's a punch to the ego knowing that I drilled a buck at 275 and drilled a bear at 323. And then I shot another doe at 320. Like, it's one of those things where, like, she's right. I need to just get my crap together and make some shorter shots. But man, it's hard. It's hard to go backwards in that way,
Yeah. I think that another thing too with the excitement, if you didn't get excited, which admittedly is what leads to that's everyone gets too excited, and that's usually what leads to the problems.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't get excited, it would take a lot of the fun out of it. So if you had like some sort of sedated you out there, it wouldn't be nearly as fun. So it's, when we undulate back and forth between like, okay, I got too excited, I need to calm down a little bit, or confident versus no confidence. Like, we go back and forth between this so much, it's hard to stay in that sweet spot because we are who we are. And if we take too much of that away, then we become, what? So it's kind of an interesting psychological dilemma as we go back and forth through the good and the bad.
Dude, it totally is. And it's one of those things too where, I think maybe as guys and gals who just put so much pressure on ourselves to perform well, whether it's because, a family member is being critical, or a spouse is going to be critical, or you're going to be critical of yourself and just want to do right by the critters. Like it just is like something that is inherent, I think, in hunting, is that you're critical of your actions, and I think you should be. So it just adds a lot of pressure, and I think maybe with age, or with experience in the mountains, like making shots and making good shots, that'll come around and be a little bit different. But yeah, it's totally a balance, and I think, just trying to reduce the undulations, reduce the roller coaster ride to smaller sine waves is probably the best goal, I think. Because if you didn't get excited about hunting, like that kind of defeats the purpose too.
Yeah, you see some people come up here, like you see it a lot in Alaska. These people come up here and it's almost like relief, and it looks like they're having no fun. They've caught their fish and they've caught whatever, and they're just, are you having any fun anymore? Is this at all joy, or is it just almost a chore? You paid for Alaska, you came up here, and well, the fishing wasn't as good as it was supposed to be. Like, man, like this is, where's the joy? Where's the excitement? Where's the, you don't have to be the hooting and hollering and getting too crazy, but there should be some joy, and there should be some, palm to your forehead every once in a while making a stupid mistake. That's kind of part of it, as long as the consequences aren't super bad, and as long as you're not doing anything super ridiculous. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's
totally, man. And I'm super stoked that you said that too, because so all of the somber talk about my last experience, like, is super uncharacteristic, because I just love being out in the woods with folks and like just screwing around. I mean, just like you and I did when you came down. We just like to have a good time, and that's how I do it in hunting too. It's just like, don't take myself too seriously. And then, you should probably, there's a moment to take yourself a little more seriously,
when
but
I was,
hopefully it's just a small portion of it.
yeah, when I was down there last year for that doe antelope tag, I was so frustrated the first couple days because, well, actually the first couple days when I was getting looks at these doe antelope, but I'd never been in such a flat area, and so I was paranoid about the cows behind the antelope. I was paranoid about the house behind, and just the idea that I don't really know what's up over that ridge. Is it trains? Is it, does the shot go all the way back to Laramie? I was so paranoid because I'd never been there. And then it turned into frustration because I was looking like something was going to happen and I was not going to get a shot. It was going to be a cow. There was going to be a train. There was going to be a house. There was going to be something always in the background. If there wasn't, then I was going to blow the stock, and I got so frustrated. And then I came all the way back toward the end where I was like, I'm just going to make a good stock on this, and if it works, it works. And then I was finally able to kind of just enjoy the experience on like the last day. So, and I look
That's
back,
so true.
and I think that was some of the most fun hunting I've done, because you really had to look at the texture in the plains, right? That they are totally flat except for these little things, and you become a more skilled hunter, and you get to do these stalks, and you get to experience this different way of doing things. And it was just an antelope tag that I ate, so it was $46 or whatever it was. If I'd have been eating a mule deer tag at 300, whatever that is, that'd be maybe a little bit different. But being able to find the joy in some level of lack of success, we just have to. There's really no other way, because otherwise you're not going to be successful all the time. You have to be prepared for that. That has to be in there. And, you're not going to be immune to frustration, but being able to enjoy it for what it is so important.
Man, and I went on that kind of a 10-day hunt this year. Not kind of. It was a 10-day hunt, archery mule deer. And it was the first hunt where I like had approached it just like what you're talking about. Like, I'm going to go up here and then just enjoy the process. I'm going to give it a lot of effort, but if I don't get something, like, I also was really realistic in just that I'm looking for a bigger buck, and like, it's hard to stalk on deer with a bow. And, I just, for the first time I went in with like a very kind of frank attitude of like, I might not get something and it's okay if I don't. And that was the most like enjoyable hunt. And it was just, I was by myself. Like for a lot of folks, it probably wouldn't have been that fun, but it was more enjoyable for sure. Just like you're saying, when you just go in there and be like, I'm going to see some cool stuff,
Yeah.
and then when you do, and then you get some opportunities and they're great. But, I think especially when you look at what your goal is for the hunt, like I also feel like I should encourage you to try to just enjoy the process of looking for mule deer when you come up in, oh, 2 weeks, because like you have meat in the freezer, you have fish in the freezer, like just come up and enjoy it and learn a lot. And if you don't kill a buck, like that should be okay. Like you've already, it's a sunk cost. The tag is a sunk cost. It's going to good conservation work. Like, I know it's hard to be like, and the reason why I'm saying this is mostly because I've done the same freaking thing of like, I had a Nebraska buck tag a couple years ago, and I just was so wanting to kill a buck on that tag. And I think it kind of detracted from the experience of the fact that like I was seeing 50 deer a day. It was pretty freaking sweet. And just it is one of the things that's a trap we fall into. And I can't tell if it's folks who maybe put themselves out there more in public or if it's everybody, but it is totally easy to fall into the trap of being like, I have to get something because, whether you think other people are critiquing you or not, like it is just like, it's a mindset we fall into. And I think you can end up being Crash Jaden if you just think about getting the thing done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's another trap that we could fall into because we know what to say before and after. So we
Uh-huh.
can say that, oh, but
Uh-huh.
it was just a great hunt. But really, the truth is, I was a miserable jerk the entire time, and I was so pissed. And so now I'm just applying what I know, what I've said before, and what I've heard before about, oh, it's really just about getting out there. And you know what? On the last day, I got the perspective, but the truth might be that I was pissed the entire time. And only now I'm saying that to kind of cover up the fact that I missed the point. So that there's there's a lot of words that are out there, and a lot of perspectives that work, and sometimes we apply them. And so I think that's the key, also, to have that legitimate enjoyment. And
Yeah.
when you're out on the hunt, really appreciate that, because sometimes we can apply all those right words after the experience.
Yeah, totally. So here's a good example. We a couple weekends ago, 2 weekends ago, we were out and we had a friend of ours from Nebraska who she came out just to experience elk hunting. And hopefully she would just like hear a bugle and her goal was to hear a bugle and see an elk. Like that was it. She hadn't done either of those two things. And we had a friend of ours who was out filming as well, just like filming Jess, and he ended up doing some work for on a project I'm working on, and so he was with us too. And we kind of like walk into this area after 2 days of not hearing any bugles. We didn't see an elk for two straight hunting days, and then walk into this area at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and there's a cow, and it's just like staring there looking at us. So we all drop down in the sagebrush. And I guess to set the scene a little bit more, this is kind of helpful. There's a giant north slope with a creek running down the bottom. In the creek bottom, there are a bunch of aspens, and then on the south slope side there's a couple juniper trees, like cedar type trees, and sagebrush, and it's rocks and just open. So we're walking down the south slope to get to the north slope where we know the elk like to hang out. And as we're walking down the sagebrush, there's a cow right at the edge of the creek bottom. It's just like feeding on the edge of the aspens. And so we hunker down in the sagebrush and just sit next to this old dead tree. And there's four of us: Jess, me, Mel, the gal from Nebraska, and Joe, the filmographer, the videographer. And so we're sitting there and just going to wait until she feeds back into the trees, and then we'll finish our walk to the north slope. And she's about 280 yards away. And as we're sitting there waiting for her to feed back into the timber, another cow elk walks out. And then another cow elk walks out. And then they kind of meander back in. And then another cow elk walks back out. And so between that next, from 3 o'clock until about 6 o'clock, there ends up being 30, 40 head of cows feeding out in front of us. And we're like, holy cow, this is a great experience, And then a little tiny tweaker bull, like we say that, like it's like a little satellite bull, like a 3-point raghorn, just kind of bugles off in the back. And we're like, oh, that's cool. And as we're sitting there in the sagebrush, I look at Jess and I'm like, I think, we both agree on this too. I don't remember who come up with the idea, but we just look at each other and be like, this is going to be an epic experience. If we don't get a shot, that's fine. Let's just like sit here and enjoy what's going to go down and like, just take this all in, because this is sweet.
Yeah.
So we're sitting out there in the sagebrush, and pretty soon that satellite bull comes out and he kind of bugles a little bit. And then we hear up the drainage like a mile, just a giant like just roar of a bull. And we're like, oh God, that's pretty sweet. So, some time goes on, some bulls start popping their heads out of the timberline, and pretty soon 2 bulls start fighting. So there's 2 satellite bulls fighting to our left. They just crash their way about 70 yards away from us. And we're sitting there like, holy cow, maybe I should make a move. And then the bull that was screaming up the canyon, he pops his head out and he just rips a bugle right on the edge of the aspens. And it is just something out of like Nat Geo or Primos or whatever. Like it's just that thing where, and this is a giant bull. He's just, oh my God, he was big. He had big wide frame, and then he like had his thirds were swooped way out and they're long, and he's just a sweet bull. Anyway, he gets out there and he starts rutting cows and bugling, and then he runs off some like little tiny bulls, and then another set of bulls come out that are satellites, and they start fighting. So we've got one set of satellites fighting on our left, one set of satellite bulls fighting on our right, and then we've got this giant bull in front of us bugling his face off. And there's 40 head of cows just like around us, plus a couple other smaller bulls on the fringes. And it's just the most insane experience. So then eventually Jess kind of tries to sneak in there too. She got to 53 yards, I think, on that big bull and just couldn't get a shot because he was rutting cows and he was always moving, right? And just kind of moved. We started bugling, and just right at last light, this little satellite bull, well, he wasn't little, he was just 5 or 6 point, came in to where we were sitting in the sagebrush. Keep in mind, we have not moved from where we were at 3 p.m. and it's now like 7:30. And that little bull, man, he comes up and he just, is really curious about what the sounds that we're making. And he comes up, and I lay down in the sagebrush because there's no place to draw without being seen. And so I lay down flat on my back in the sagebrush. I'm actually doing it in my chair right now as I'm talking to you.
Perfect.
And I laid down, and my arrow's knocked, and Jess is going to range find for me. And she's like, okay, he's at 63. He's at 57. And she goes, he's at 50 yards broadside. Or he's at 50 yards. Can you make that shot? I was like, yeah, I can make a 50-yard shot. Like, and she goes, okay, he's broadside. And so I draw back and I sit up, and it's too dark to see my bottom pin.
Yeah.
and we let him go. And it was just like, it was one of those experiences where like, I will never, ever forget that evening. It was the most insane experience. And the fact that I got drawn back on a bull was like freaking sweet. But it was just like, I don't even think about that as like, oh, wow, I missed that opportunity. The fact that we were in all of that action and we saw all of that stuff go down was the experience that I was looking for. I did everything except have a heavy pack on my back, and it was a pretty hard hike out of there. So I got away scot-free. But that's just like, you think about those kinds of stories and those kinds of experiences that you like look back on for the rest of your life. Like those are the reason why I go hunting, or a large portion of why I go hunting, not necessarily for the kill. And especially maybe as you spend more time or have more tags that are easier to fill, and you don't have an empty freezer, you got plenty of opportunity and time off to go hunting. Like it's a luxury, but it is totally just like part of that experience that you just can't trade by going in and shooting the first thing, that you run into.
That's the difference between something not working out and it being your fault. Like, it was just the conditions it happened to walk in, happened to be close enough at a time in which the sun had set. Like, it's not your fault. It just didn't work out. And those are, if you can seal those away, and that's just, it's the way it is. Enjoy the experience. Those are great. And having those is awesome. If every time that you went out, you screwed up, that'd be tough to take.
Yeah, man. And I think that's exactly the difference, right? Is like, it's better to not take a shot and have it, you didn't take the perfect shot, and that's the story, and you had a great experience, than I took a shitty shot, I blew a back leg off, and then we had to chase it for a quarter of a mile or a half mile and, put it out of its misery. That's not the story you want. And not only is it not the story you want, it's not the story you want because everyone knows, like, that critter suffered for that whole time and you didn't do right by that critter. It's just like, it's more to it than the optics, but the optics are what should make you feel kind of bad about that story.
Yeah. Well, man, it's 5:40 and I got to do the old morning routine and get to school. So thanks for coming on here and sharing some stories. Always great to have you on.
Dude, I love having these conversations. I realized today I just ended up spilling all the beans to you. So I appreciate you just putting a coin in my interview slot, and I just ramble. It's really fun. And man, I just can't tell you how excited I am for you to come down here this next month and try to get you a buck in Wyoming. It's gonna be sweet, and I'm sure you're gonna have a bunch of stories. And if you want me to tease out your story, I'm more than happy to do that.
I have visions sometimes, and it's starting to thread itself into my dreams about this. So we've sighted a couple of these different rocks and how far they are from beds. So in case we get to this spot, if the wind's here, it's 200 yards to this bed, and so would be where we take the shot. So we have all that stuff laid out just in case. Like knowing that terrain, the boots have been down. We have the game cams out there. And so because it's so specific, I'm starting to get these images of like this nice, 2-point bedded down, or what if it's some huge thing? Looks like there's a tumbleweed on top of it, man. Just it's in there. It's in the brain. I'm pretty excited.
That's sweet, man. Well, I'm excited to hear how it goes. It's getting up here. It's getting close.
Yep. Well, thanks again, man. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
See ya.